how are you doing? Welcome to the Real Squabble. Today, Dr. Amy Downey, the president of Tzedakah Ministries, joins us to talk about her soon-to-be published book, Missions in a Minor Key. It looks at the minor prophets of the Bible and what they can teach us today, ethically, socially, and as an ally to current missionaries. She'll spell that out for us. Dr. Amy Downey has a Bachelor of Science degree in education from East Texas Baptist University, a master's in communication, and Master of Arts in theology from Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary, and was the first woman to complete a PhD in theology and apologetics from Liberty University way back in May of 2016. Probably feels like a long time ago, huh?
It does.
She is also the author of Paul's Conundrum. She released in 2011, and Maimonides, Yahweh, 2019, along with numerous magazine articles and booklets that are available on the website. Hey, before we jump in, Amy, let me remind folks that they need to follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Real Squabble. Really appreciate you joining us today.
Well, thank you. And my dog Fievel is here with us as well. So if you see a head poking up, that's my dog.
Okay, a big old woof woof to Fievel.
Yes.
Today. Amy, the musical play on words for the title of your book is clever.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, given that the tone of the minor prophets, from my understanding, seems to be more somber, serious, and reflective. Is that a good assessment?
It is. And it also is because, they're Jewish. And a lot of Jewish music is in the minor key. So that's how I came up with the idea for the title. So
okay. Well, how did you come up with the idea of the project?
Well, it goes back to when I was in college. And I discovered that nobody reads. Hi, Joshua.
Hello. Hi. Sorry, I'm jumping in. I was wrapping up another call meeting.
That's all right. I discovered that nobody reads the minor prophets except at certain times, usually during prophecy conferences or Micah for Christmas. And I decided I was going to sit down and read the minor prophets. Now, did I understand everything I read during college? Absolutely not. But I fell in love with the minor prophets, especially Hosea, which we'll get to in a little bit. And so I fell in love with the minor prophets. And I just started reading them. And then I reread them as I got older. And I went, wow, I did not understand what I read in college.
So are they minor prophets because they work in the coal mines, or they're not as important as the other prophets?
No, they're minor because they're short.
They're short.
And actually, I don't actually like calling them minor prophets.
Right.
They're minor. They got the title or the minor because they're shorter in size.
Gotcha. Not less important.
Not less important.
I have to tell you that sometimes I feel like I have not paid as much attention to the minor prophets. I felt like I'm kind of like sludging through maple syrup or something to try to do that. But hopefully after today we'll learn more and be able to have a greater understanding, maybe a higher interest. Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, they are dense. I think it's because they're trying to get a lot said in a few words. And they are dense, and sometimes they're tough reading. But they're important, and I think they're overlooked because they are so dense. But they have a lot to tell us, and a lot of times they're overlooked because when we start understanding what they say, we don't like what they have to tell us.
Well, do you mind if we briefly look at each of the prophets without giving away your book? Because
I want people to buy it.
Yeah, exactly. And just mention that where the prophets go for the book.
Yeah, sure. Well, do you want to start, or do you want me to start?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. No, I will, but go ahead and tell folks where what the intention of the sales of the book will be for.
Well, I'm the president of a ministry that specifically targets if you couldn't figure out the word tzedakah, I'm a
Mhm.
missionary to the Jewish people. And so instead of Amy getting the royalties, which I don't expect $1 million unless we sell a lot of books, the royalty, which hopefully we will, but the royalties are going to go back into the ministry.
Okay.
Because, and specifically, we're going to target the royalties to a specific fund, which is going to be a fund to, I use my hands a lot, so this is hard for me.
No, you go for it.
But I'm not
My wife is half Italian. She kind of flies when she talks. That's okay.
okay. But I'm not charismatic, so it's okay. So Liberty's okay with that. So, but anyway, I think we're all Liberty grads or Liberty students. So,
Well, not Joshua, I don't think.
where did you go, Joshua?
I think we did have a connection at some point. Maybe I didn't go to Liberty, but I did teach for Liberty at some point.
Okay, I thought I saw Liberty on your Facebook page. So,
Yeah. As well as
you may
Houston
have.
Christian.
Yeah.
You taught at Houston Christian as well too.
okay,
That's
so
right.
So it's with Dr. Baggett is our connection.
Yes, so I have a connection there. Yeah, I taught at Houston Baptist, now Houston Christian for, was it 5 years? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
By the way, he was the only professor to give me a B in my seminar.
Oh, gee.
that-
Oh, boo.
What a guy.
I
Man.
I've heard
know.
about him.
You know, I'm
I've
going to
heard
talk to Dave. Call me. Okay. All right.
Anyway, but but the funds.
Mhm.
Sorry, rabbit trail.
That's okay.
That was
But
a fun one.
but thank you. I was too Calvinist for him. So anyway.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'll do it. That'll
But
do it. My best, one of my closest friends is Jerry Wall. So
Oh,
if,
dear.
if you were in his class, it would have been
It would have
worse.
been a C, but anyway.
Oh, yeah.
But
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's like the chief Arminian, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
of all Arminians.
Oh,
and,
yes.
And
Oh,
went to
yes.
school at Notre Dame. So, but
yeah.
he's
Anyway.
retired now. He's retired now, so there's no danger, Amy.
That's
Okay,
right.
good.
That's right.
But the funds are going to go to a specific evangelistic outreach that we're planning. The royalties. See, I can go on a rabbit trail, but I can get back. But the funds are going to go to we're planning a booklet which is based on my dog, because I wrote a booklet entitled "Can Fievel Be Kosher?" and we're trying to, because dogs are not kosher in the ultra orthodox world, but but Hasidic men love dogs. They just won't admit it to anybody in their world. And so I found a way to write a booklet that shows that redemption is possible around a dog. So we're trying to raise the funds for the printing of this booklet.
Gotcha.
And all the funds, all the royalties will go towards the printing of that booklet.
That's excellent. Well,
So
just real
if
quick.
that doesn't motivate you to buy the book, I don't know what will. So
Well, I want to mention, as an old rock and roll disc jockey, I go down rabbit trails and have a hard time getting back. So pull me in sometimes. Yes. And let's go ahead and work our way down. We've got 12 minor prophets we want to look at, and we have an hour.
Okay.
So let's try to move through these, and let's start with Hosea, because Hosea's life and message and how these relate to missions, right? Or to the missionary. You had mentioned from the ethical or social standpoint. So let's try to touch on those as we go through. Hosea's life and message revolve around God's faithful love for Israel, despite their unfaithfulness, right?
Well, and Hosea is an interesting book because a lot of people look at Hosea, and I don't. A lot of people look at Hosea, especially because of that Francine Rivers book, as a love story, but it's not a love story. It's actually the question I often ask when I read Hosea was God divorced? And in a lot of ways, the answer is yes, but God took Israel back. Because Hosea was asked by God to marry I hope I can get away with saying this word.
Yeah, you can, but no censors on this show.
Was asked to marry a whore because she was. Because Israel had played the harlot with God. And that's so, Francine Rivers' apologies, and I mentioned this in the book, Hosea is not a love story. Hosea is a story of heartbreak because Israel broke God's heart. Gomer, not Andy Griffith, sorry. Gomer broke, sorry, that was my joke.
Okay,
Okay.
We'll laugh later.
Thank
Okay.
you. Somebody's got to be laughing.
Okay.
Gomer broke Hosea's heart. So it's an analogy, but it's a true analogy. And so it's a heartbreaking story. And we can look at the story of Hosea and Gomer and Israel and God today, because we are breaking God's heart today as the church. So it's an analogy that takes place continually. Sorry, I'm holding my dog and using the fan.
That's
But
okay.
it's a story of heartbreak, as how we break God's heart continually, but yet how he continually takes us back.
Gotcha. This is the real squabble, Joshua, so feel free to argue.
Yeah.
In a friendly way.
In a friendly way.
Joshua can get way out of hand sometimes.
Oh yeah. I can tell by his face. He just looks like a mean guy.
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no, good. Yeah, I haven't read Francine Rivers, but I do remember. I actually don't think I disagree. I think I guess I tend to read texts through some sort of TIS these days, more theological interpretation. But when I look at that book, yeah, there is a lot of romanticizing of that book, and like a kind of reading in between the lines that this is a romance, like he's going after Gomer, and that there, that there's some sort of implication that there's a happy romantic ending or something like that, and it's not that way, is it? But there is an image of kind of a redemptive figure going after a harlot, right? And
yeah,
even amidst her unfaithfulness, right? Yeah, that's the idea? That's what you're saying?
Yeah,
right?
I am. It is, and and that is, there's the poem, "The Hound of Heaven," that he chases us even when we don't deserve to be chased. And that is the story of Hosea, and when my understanding, and just so people will know, and pastors are going, okay, is a woman just looking at it through an analogy? No, I'm not somebody who just looks at it from an analogy perspective. I did it from an exegetical perspective too. I looked through all the verbs. I looked at it from an exegetical perspective, and all these books. If you look at it from an exegetical perspective, you can see that there's a lot of hifil verbs in all of these minor prophets, which is the idea of, God caused himself to go after Israel. God caused Hosea to go after. And I love the hifil verb in the Hebrew, because it's God causing himself, or God causing Hosea to do this. Hosea didn't want to after a while, but he caused him because he wanted the analogy to continue.
So
go ahead.
What is the application for, say, a missionary today from the book?
Sometimes missionaries don't want to. Mission work is exceptionally difficult. I told you, Mike, this morning I was filling out a mission application to ask a church to support us, the ministry. And mission work is exceptionally difficult. And there are times when you're like, God, why is it so tough? But it's not supposed to be. If it was easy, everybody'd be a missionary. Because if it was easy, we would all be doing it. But we're not all doing it. I tell people, people are like, well, they didn't get saved. I shared the gospel with somebody and they didn't get saved. And I tell them, okay, but you planted the seed. And that's that's what it tells us. Paul told us in 1 Corinthians, some plant, some water, but it's God who gains the increase. And that is, it's not our job to save anyone. It is only our job to plant or to water, because it is ultimately God who gains the increase.
Yeah. That's a perspective you really need when you're in very secularized parts of the world.
Yeah.
In Europe or Asia, where there's very few Christians other than maybe Korea.
Yeah.
So let's move forward. Go ahead, John.
Just a clarification is, and then I wanted to ask, and I don't want to take away if this is going in a different direction than what you wanted. I was just going to ask, is Hosea for you kind of a picture of the psalmist, in Psalm 23 when he says, "Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life"? An analogy of the God-Israel relationship as a kind of mission in a wider theology of mission. Is that the idea?
It is, because, it's because, we are supposed to be persistent. And I know the man's last name is Thompson. And that's why I can't remember. That's the Hound of Heaven. It's that idea of pursuit. God is always pursuing us. That's why I am Calvinistic, but I'm not a very good Calvinist. And
Francis Thompson.
Thank you. And so that is why, he does pursue us, and he will pursue us. And so that is why the goodness and grace will follow us, even when we don't want to be followed.
I see. And so bigger picture here in terms of the ministry, is that, how does that fit into the ministry that you're doing? The
Tzedakah. Yeah.
Tzedakah ministries.
It's the Hebrew word for righteous, Joshua. And,
Thank you. My Hebrew wasn't very good. I took 2 semesters in seminary on the, what was it? This was a long time ago, on the Fuller system, Russell Fuller system.
Okay. I don't know him. I had Harry Hunt at Southwestern, and he made us learn from the Cal to the Hizpael. We had to learn the whole chart. So,
well, I've been to the Hebrew coffee house. That's about it for me. So that's right. Let's move into the next minor prophet, if you don't mind. Joel warns of a devastating locust plague as a symbol of coming judgment, but also promises that God would pour out his spirit on all the people, right?
Well, and I really enjoyed studying Joel when I was writing the chapter, because a lot of people want to skip the locusts and go straight.
Don't we all?
Yeah, we all want to skip the locusts and go straight to the old men shall dream dreams and the young men shall see the visions, but we can't get there until we go through the locusts. And that's what and that is important. And especially, and the dreaming and the dreams and the seeing the visions are misunderstood a lot of times. Because if you look at the dreaming dreams and seeing visions, and again, I made the joke about being charismatic, and I have a lot of charismatic friends, and I appreciate them. And by the way, when I need prayer, I go to them. But a lot of my friends who are charismatic, they go straight to that, and they talk about that in the end times, but that's not necessarily an end times prophecy. And because that dreaming dreams and seeing visions and all of that is a promise for then and now. But you have to go through the locust, because that was a part of the punishment they were going to experience for their disobedience.
Okay. All right.
And so we don't like to talk about disobedience, especially in our churches today. And we have to face the consequences of our disobedience. And why was the Israelites being disobedient? And Joel talks about that as well. Why were the Israelites being disobedient in Joel? They were being disobedient because they were forgetting to be truly honorable in their sacrifices.
Mhm.
They were skipping over taking care of the less fortunate.
Mhm.
And let's look at ourselves today, ethically and socially. And by the way, and we're probably not going to get to all the minor prophets, obviously, because we're already 20 minutes in. But if
Mhm.
you look at all of the minor prophets, a lot of what they were being punished for before, during, and after going to Babylon is because they were not taking care of the less fortunate. And I know we don't like the term, especially in the evangelical world, the word social justice. And I know that that phrase can be taken out of context and used in a very liberal, progressive connotation. And I understand that.
Mhm.
But biblical social justice is a term we need to consider. If we look at it biblically, is the church today taking care of our less fortunate? Inside the church, outside the church? Are we taking care of those who are hungry, who are hurting, who are less fortunate? Are we? By the way, that's a question for you too.
Yeah. Did you want to say
No,
something,
we're
Josh?
not. Yeah, no, you were probably not. Yeah, well, that was the short answer. But no, since you ask it, but I mean, I think it raises. Yeah, so this is a helpful lens by which the church needs to be uh, properly oriented as we think about wider issues, societal issues that the church has some kind of role in, maybe you might say. Um, and so this is a perspective, a lens that needs to help sort of rightly sort of orient us. I'm thinking of like I've been to lots of evangelical churches, and when we think about disobedience, there is a tendency. I think maybe it's because there's just this tension between this kind of a free grace, a sense of evangelism as being kind of motivating the mission of churches today, that seems to be in tension with this kind of more formative understanding of discipling people and helping them along and becoming more obedient to Christ and these sorts of things. I've been in lots of churches, even conservative evangelical churches, where right now, like they're like not even talking about like sexual immorality. Like they're kind of shying away from that in terms of like sex before marriage and stuff like that. You know, pretty
Yeah.
basic morality, like we should be talking about. We should have a framework for. But like, so this whole issue of obedience just sits kind of in tension with the kind of, maybe it's a free grace perspective. So
Yeah.
we need some reorienting, maybe. So maybe this helps with that. But it raises another question that you're talking about with social justice. To what extent is the church, or should the church be involved in the process of social justice, and in terms of economically helping? Because I've been in lots of churches, and there's lots of young men who are working very hard, and they cannot earn a living right now. And so to what extent should the church actually be involved in that, and in providing context to help
Mhm.
these young men along economically?
Well,
Um,
and that's the question, is, as a missionary, that I struggle with is, there was a missionary, and I don't want to go off on a rabbit trail, so help me, Mike, and help me, Joshua. There was a missionary in the 19-teens, 1920s named Walter Rauschenbusch, who went to the Hell's Kitchen area of New York City, and he wanted to reach, and Hell's Kitchen deserved the name. It deserves the name again. Who wanted to reach the prostitutes and the drug addicts, and there were drug addicts back then too. And
Mhm.
he got so overwhelmed by the physical lostness, the hunger and the depravity, that he lost the need to reach their spiritual needs. And that's how the original term social gospel originated. And reaching their social needs overtook reaching their spiritual needs.
Mm-hmm.
And missionaries can get lost reaching their social needs, physical needs, that they forget their spiritual needs. But can you tell someone about Jesus if their stomach is growling? It's a tough balance. And I mentioned Walter Rauschenbusch in the book, especially I think it's in the chapter on Amos,
Mm-hmm.
and the chapter on Micah, because you have to meet someone's physical needs sometimes to reach their spiritual needs, but you have to balance it.
Mm-hmm.
If you do one over the other, then you've lost the balance.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Amos denounces social injustice.
Yeah. But Micah 6:6-8 talks about, I see your sacrifices, but they don't mean anything because you've forgotten to feed the hungry and take care of the widows and et cetera, et cetera. So it's a balance.
Well, do we need to be more like Micah and confront people? Confront the leaders? Is that a lesson we can take from that?
I think it is, and Isaiah and Amos were prophet compatriots at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll read Isaiah, but we forget Amos. And so it's a tough balance. And Isaiah was a professional prophet, and Amos was a lay prophet. And so, do we?
Okay, you need to parse that out for me.
Yeah.
Was he paid to be a what's the deal there?
Yeah. Well, Isaiah was a priest.
Okay.
And Amos was a sheep herder.
Okay, gotcha.
But they were both called by God to be prophets.
Mm-hmm.
So is one greater than the other? No, they are both called to be equal in God's eyes. So why do we read Isaiah, who's just as Isaiah was Isaiah, but Amos is Amos?
Mm-hmm.
I know we're sticking around. I'm sorry, Mike.
No, that's good because, as you said, we probably won't be able to hit all of them today. So it's great that we are, and we can sort of summarize some of the social, ethical things toward the end too. Let's talk about Obadiah, the shortest book in the Old Testament. What does Obadiah have to say?
Well, and I love Obadiah, and I actually I put a question on Facebook. I asked somebody, how many have ever heard a sermon on Obadiah? And people were like, no, I never have. And
yeah.
Okay, next Sunday, pastors, there's going to be across the country. That's the influence we have here. Everyone's going to be, priests everywhere, pastors, everybody talking about Obadiah.
I had one friend who used to be the president of the Southern Baptist Convention, Bart Barber, said, I preached a sermon on Obadiah, and I actually preached a sermon series on Obadiah. So I have to give credit to Bart Barber, but he was the only one.
So you preach a series that's actually longer than the book.
Right? Probably. But what did Obadiah have? But he was a short prophet who had a lot to say. And I'm looking at my table of content, so I'm going to actually cheat for a second. And so I paired Obadiah with Amos, by the way, because they both had something to say about being ethical in an unethical world.
Wow.
Because they were both talking about, are you ethical? And are you ethical in an unethical world? Because they were both preaching to unethical people. And I'm going to cheat because I'm going to look at my phone.
That's okay. I see, just within the church laity of people that don't understand the message or have that ignorance is bliss kind of mentality that, that they like not knowing certain things. So you find it there, Amy?
Yeah, I did. Because, when Amos was preaching to the people, he started off preaching, and I could almost imagine, because, he started preaching about the sins of Edom and all the neighboring countries.
Mm-hmm.
And I can almost imagine that, if this was a Baptist church, because, I grew up Baptist, and, all the people were like going, amen, preach about them. And then he's got, because what was going on in Edom, what was going on in Moab, I mean, horrible things. They were killing each other. They were doing, human trafficking was going on. The equivalent of human trafficking was going on. And that's what Obadiah was preaching about as well. But then he got to Judah and Israel. You can almost see the people, if this was a church service, whoa, you're stepping on toes now.
Mm.
We can preach about them. We can talk about them outside, but let's not talk about us inside. And that's what Amos started. And Amos and Obadiah are compatriots, because even in Obadiah, he talks about Edom. He talks about what's going on and how, Jerusalem is going to be captured, and why they're going to be captured by these heretics. And he talks about that, and Amos does as well. But talk about them, don't talk about us.
Gotcha. Any input, Joshua?
Oh, I just had a little comic relief, but also to playing off of this.
That's my job.
It's an important it's an important ethical kind of calibration. This is important discussion in terms of like ethics right now is so complicated and varied between the various Christian tribes. But I think this gives us a kind of sense, looking at the minor prophets and looking at what's meant by ethics. I'm reminded I tend to be more of a C.S. Lewis type Christian than a Bob Jones type Christian, and they have two very different ethical perspectives on things, right? I got this mug right here. It's kind of a humorous mug. It says Gourmet Fundamentalist Coffee, and it says cut your hair, wipe off that makeup, and drink it, or you'll go to hell.
Yeah. I was looking for that controversial moment on the show for the real Squabble. Thanks for giving that to us.
Thank you.
Which leads us into the most controversial thing that I think that Amy brought up in her book. We're talking about Missions in a Minor Key, which will soon be published. You can tell us when later on. But,
sometime this week.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
On Amazon and other places?
On Amazon and other places, yeah.
Okay, good. I love that other places, Well, you made the comment to me in a chat that Jonah was a lousy prophet, missionary, and that Nahum just had to come in and clean up what Jonah messed up.
Yeah.
So, right. Well, okay. People are tuning out right now because, they're part of the Jonah fan club, and they had a whale of a time last night at the party. So you need to clarify some things.
Jonah was a lousy prophet. Jonah was a jerk. Jerky Jonah. Jonah was a lousy prophet. I'll say it again a couple more times. If you look at the whole passage, in 4 chapters, Jonah whined, Jonah complained, Jonah didn't want to go. When he got there, and if you read the text in context and in exegetical context, he didn't go to the whole city. He only went to about half the city. I know we always say, oh, he went to the whole city repented. He only went to about half the city. we talk about he got there. He got there in 3 days, and he got there in 1 day. It should have been a 3-day journey. No, in the context of the passage, and everybody who buys the book still should read the whole book. The whole city takes 3 days to go through.
Mm-hmm.
He only went through the city in 1 day. He only went to about 40% of the city.
He only did half of his job.
He did half his job.
Yeah.
And then when he saw that the city that he went to was repenting, he went outside the city and he whined and complained and said, "God, kill me, because I've heard the prophecy they're going to take over Israel, Judah." Wow. He was the
Eeyore of missionaries. Is what
no, he was a jerk of missionaries.
But I hate to say it, but I see, a lot of us are kind of that way, sticking our toe in, whining and complaining the whole way, not trusting God.
And the only good missionaries and the only good people in the whole story, besides the ones who repented in Nineveh, were the guys on the boat. He was a bad missionary. And by the way, there are bad missionaries out there.
Yeah.
I try not to be. Sometimes I complain. And this going through this book, and writing this chapter, I got convicted. Because sometimes I complain. God, why don't they believe already? But when they heard that, what did the guys on the boat do? They cast their lots, which I've always had a problem with, but they cast their lots. They saw it was Jonah. They said, "Jonah, what do we do?" They heard the message. They did. They didn't want to cast Jonah over, but they did it anyway. But they believed. They believed and they worshiped God.
I thought maybe they just got tired of his whining.
But Jonah never, and even inside the well, Jonah's first prayer was, "God, I'm sorry, God, I'm sorry." But Jonah's second prayer was kind of whiny too. If you really look at it, it was a whiny prayer. Jonah whined the whole time. And a lot of times Christians are a bunch of whiners. Come on, don't give me that look, Mike. Because we'll go to around the world, but we really will talk about the people that God calls us to share the gospel with. And we will see them as not as good as us. But God said to reach the whole world because everyone needs the gospel. And Nahum, if you read Nahum, and very few people have read Nahum, it's a very convicting book because Nahum had to tell Nineveh and the Assyrians, "You will be destroyed." Because a very few years, I can't remember right off the top of my head how many years. Within less than a couple of 100 years, Nineveh was right back to where they were because Jonah did not finish his job. And
so you have missionaries out there who are not all in. It's kind of the
who are not all
analogy.
in. Yeah, who are not. And when missionaries, when pastors, when Christians do not finish the work that have been assigned to them, what happens to the country, the church that they've been assigned to?
I think that's a good point because, the church, it's not just on them. People aren't all in supporting the ministries either. That's been a big deal for our family of supporting various missionaries. Not like the person who shows up at church and puts $1 in the plate, but consistently giving them something that they can budget, wherever they are, whether they're in Africa. We support some missionaries in a couple different ones. Some of them suffering in northern Italy, So, but they are really, it's very difficult for
It's a
them
difficult field.
bust through the wall, even though Italy has got a strong Catholic traditional culture. It's very difficult to break through some of those traditions and walls that they have there, and they need to be able to breathe instead of always trying to think about fundraising.
Uh-huh.
And to be able to breathe and think about the mission, because if you're spending 90% of your time trying to figure out how you're going to feed your wife and your kids that you drug around the world, and you trust to God, and then you're going to get in that place where you start questioning whether you were actually called to be a missionary.
Oh yeah.
You know?
And and I don't want to sound like I'm complaining, because I'm not, because I love what I do. I'm called to what I'm doing. I'm heading out. I'm heading out to Texas, in a couple of weeks to fundraise, to do support raise.
Don't make us throw you overboard.
And I'm excited because I'll get to see friends. Hopefully I'll get to spend a couple of days seeing my sister and my niece and my great niece and nephew, and my niece's husband. I love him too, but it's my great niece and nephew that I want to see. And but I'm going to spend 2 weeks, and I'm dreading it because I want to be here. But fundraising is a part of what we have to do. And by the time I'll be there 10 days, 11 days, by about day 6, I'm going to be wanting to come home. But it is a necessary part, because this is home. This is where I'm supposed to be. But, but mission work is hard. And if you're not cut out for it, don't do it. If you're doing it because you feel like that's what somebody else thinks you're supposed to do, don't do it.
Yeah, I would say that many of the missionaries that I've seen are sort of like, Western pioneers. Honestly, they're made of that kind of stuff. The old days in America, where they're going out there and they're taking on a lot of stuff, and it's not easy. So all the Christians out there that are working, say, normal jobs, whatever that means, I would say, do that. Whether you're selling a book somewhere else that's not related directly to missions, or whatever it is you do, if you have that extra $1 or $2 that you can put toward funding that, to me, that's the way that we are salt and light, and we work together as a community of Christians.
Yeah.
So that we can function the way God wants us to.
Yeah. And and maybe I'm too hard on Jonah, but I don't think I am. But missions is what is a. I saw Joshua smile.
Well, you were pretty hard on him. I mean, he was coming up for air, and you dunked his head back under the water.
Yeah, looking for that whale, or looking for that fish again. But if you don't have a heart, doing the job only halfway is not doing the job at all.
Yeah. Well, he did have another. He did part of the job, and then Nahum finished it up. Sometimes that's how it happens in the Christian community.
Yeah.
Right.
And yeah, it is. But Nahum's job was to give bad news. And that's hard, and that's why people don't read Nahum, and that's why people don't want to read Habakkuk, because Habakkuk, and I'm looking at my table of contents again. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Habakkuk was Habakkuk. I teamed Habakkuk with Micah, because because Habakkuk was telling the people, build the temple already. I know it's not going to be as grand as Solomon's temple, but build it already. You're living in nice houses, but you're wondering why you're struggling, because you're not truly serving God. And because sometimes I think in today's world, we talk about serving God, We go back to where you're serving, to what you were talking about just a minute ago. We say we serve God, but do we
Right.
truly serve God?
Right.
Do we serve God the way we want to serve God?
Well, we question things all the time. I don't think it's wrong to question, but Habakkuk seems to like encompass a lot of the things that you're talking about in that, he questions the presence of evil and injustice, but learns to trust God, I guess, and God's wisdom and timing. And that's tough. That's hard to do.
Yeah, and I confused Habakkuk with Haggai, but it's still the same principle of what you were saying.
Mm-hmm.
God, why are things hard? Well, because you're not doing what I'm telling you to.
Mm-hmm.
But God, why are things hard? Because you're not doing the things that I want you to do. Well, why are bad things happening? Well, because you haven't done what I've told you to do.
Mm-hmm.
But
Right.
again, it's not wrong to ask the questions.
Right.
But sometimes we have to shut up and take the answers.
Yeah.
And that's, again, the part of Micah. We automatically go to Micah 5:2 for our little Christmas sermons or Christmas messages, but we don't read the first part of Micah, which is tough. And we can't in our churches and in our Sunday school classes just pick and choose the part of the minor prophets that make us feel good.
Mm-hmm.
We have to read the whole passages and the whole context, because Micah 5:2 is wonderful, but you have to get to Micah 5:2.
Yeah.
And
speaking of where the Messiah would be born.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And that's a wonderful prophecy. It's a wonderful promise.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes before we can get to the promise, we have to get to we have to go through the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Does
this how does Joshua, I know you're I mean,
I have a
mostly
question for
Christian ministry, right? I mean, you are an Episcopalian priest, right? And you're a teacher, and I see things you post where you go out. You're just very approachable. You go to coffee houses to talk to people. That's kind of like a mission trip, right there.
Is.
Honestly, it's a mini mission trip. Maybe quite impactful. It can be, I'm sure. But I'm sure you sit there maybe some days, maybe thinking like a missionary. Or am I wrong?
You are, Joshua.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. That's encouraging. No, I mean, really, that is encouraging. Sometimes it's kind of perceived as quaint. Episcopalian in the sense of, that is a very ambiguous term today. I just want to put that out there. I'm not a part of the Episcopal Church, which is basically apostate. I have friends in that church, so I could get in trouble for saying that.
Are you more Anglican, I guess?
Yeah, well, they would call it Anglican. I mean, I'm a part of a broader communion. There's no perfect term right now.
Southern Baptist Anglican.
Let's just put it all together. Evangelical. It's all one thing, right? Evangelical.
I have friends who are evangelical Anglican, Joshua. I understand.
Yeah. So, no, it's fun. It's good fun. Yeah, I'm part of the Diocese of Kajira. They recognize my orders. They're actually considering me a missionary in the U.S., as the U.S. needs missionaries right now as it's falling away. And so, there is kind of a missional focus, a public-facing focus of ministry. A lot of ministers are not out there at all doing much or meeting with the people.
Right.
Maybe it's uncomfortability, or maybe it is, to be charitable. Maybe it is more thoughtful. They have a view of being much more internally focused on the people that they have been called to serve as shepherds, Jacob, but they're not very out there. They're not engaged with people or engaged with other ministers. They're very isolated in their sort of insular towers, like the academics in many ways. So I do try to get out there as a priest to be available to people. If you need to come pray, make a confession, or just chat about things that you're struggling with. So that I'm not in my church or parish that I'm establishing at the moment. And yeah, so I actually do have a question that's related to that.
Yeah.
It's very practical. It's also technical, related to the book and what you're doing. Missions in a minor key. It's just to give me some help, some framework. There's been a lot of talk about missional theology, and I'm wondering where this is situated. Is this too technical of a question,
No,
Mike?
no.
I was a part of Missional University for 3 years. I worked with them. They're trying to provide a kind of comprehensive missional theology in different facets of different aspects of all life, agriculture, and everything. And so they're trying to think more comprehensively in that way, but they're really motivated. A lot of the missional stuff is motivated by Christopher J.H. Wright's work.
I love his books.
Oh, you do? Okay. So I was just curious because there's a lot of debate, about this, and I was curious where you fit. If the work is motivated by that. There's some who say, yeah, there's a great mission focus and that carries over into the church. Like there's a lot we are called to do, representing God, for God. And then there's critiques of that saying, yeah, there is a place for that, but that's not the place of the church, which has practical ramifications kind of for what we're talking about, how I view like going out to the coffee shop, and maybe other pastors are kind of more kind of isolated to their parishes or their churches or the like. So that's a big question, like kind of where your book is kind of.
Well, my theology of missions, or missional theology, believes that missions begins locally, within the church, within the community, and then it spreads outward. So, by the way, I call it Jesus time because I don't like the phrase quiet time or devotional time. I call it Jesus time. I go to Dunkin' Donuts. And
well, how much more spiritual could that be?
Yeah.
Come on.
Coffee and donuts. But and the place where I go, there's a lot of young people working there. I know all their names. I watch their faces. I ask how they're doing. I noticed the other day one of them was having a bad day. So the other day I said, "Are you having a better day?" She goes, "Yeah, and thank you for asking." And so and none of them are Jewish, but they're people who have souls who need Jesus.
Of course.
And so missions is local. Missions is functionally where you are at the given moment, with whom you are at the given moment. And they all know I'm a Christian. They all know I'm there. By the way, I was working on my book while I was there. And so they all knew what I was doing. They all thought it was cool that I was writing a book there. And so, and they know they can talk to me. By the way, some of them are Satanists, by the way, but they all like me.
That's good.
Well,
because I'm friendly to them. All of them have tattoos, and they know I don't care because it doesn't matter where they are now. It matters where I want them to end up being.
Yeah.
And so I don't look at what they are or who they are. I look at what I want them to become.
Well, thank you for being real like that. I think that's honestly coming. Academia has its place. It really does. Philosophy, all of that. But when you bring it down to the street level and you touch the lives of these people in real, genuine ways, that has impact beyond impact.
Yeah. And, and I know some of them are, some of them are Wiccan. Some of them are just flat out Satanists. Some of them are
confused.
Every letter on the alphabet. And, but they all know I care.
Right.
That's great.
That's so important.
And
It really
that
is.
and that is where I think the minor prophets met the people. They didn't want them to stay where they were, but they met them where they were.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they got real and difficult, like Hosea. He met Gomer where she was, but he didn't want to leave her where she was.
Wow.
But if you notice, the prophets that were the most real were talking to the Israelites and we're talking to the priestly crowd.
Right.
And like Malachi or like Haggai, or they were talking to the priestly crowd, and they were the toughest because of who
Yeah.
they were talking to.
Right. So,
Right.
Amy, let's start to wind it down just a bit here. We're reaching right at an hour, and I really appreciate your time this morning. Dr. Amy Downey is the president of Tzedakah Ministries. But you touched on a lot of things, and it really does seem. Maybe you'd like to expound on it for just a minute of how, because we talked about being real and genuine. It seems like as hard as these books can be to plod through, sometimes that we're seeing some really strong social and ethical lessons that you just brought up. It seems like that's it. When you go to that coffee house, that's the real life place where stuff that happens. If it had been happening in Nineveh, maybe Jonah would have had an easier time. But kind of give us a last couple words about your book and our takeaway, and where we can find when it's being published, and where we can find it.
It'll be on Amazon. It will obviously be on the publisher's website, which they're publishing you too, Mike. So we can both push for them.
Okay.
And but also it will be available, and I'll post it on our website. I'll post it on my Facebook page.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a book that is meant for the lay people. It's meant for the pastor. That was one of the reasons I wrote it. I don't want it to be so commentary driven that a lay person, a Sunday school teacher, a small group can't get into it. So, but I don't want it to be, forgive me, Father, for I'm about to sin. I don't want it to be on such a Warren Wiersbe. Thank you for doing that for me, Father Joseph. That it can't. That a pastor will feel like he can't use it for his sermon prep either.
Gotcha.
And so I try to balance it between the two. And you're gonna learn a lot about me, because I try to use a lot of human illustrations.
Mm-hmm.
And because my father was a pastor, my mom was a pastor's wife, and my dad never pastored a church over 100, so he dealt with real life human beings.
Mm-hmm.
Because he couldn't live in the ivory tower.
Right.
So and so I tried to use that in my watching my parents, and living in a lot of different states and with a lot of different people.
So the best place to find out about Dr. Downey, the first woman PhD from Liberty University, 2016 in apologetics, right?
Yes.
So she has a ministry called Tzedakah Ministries. You can find it at tzedakahministries.org. Tzedakah is spelled Tzedakah. Re-listen to this video 100 times, and you can get the spelling down. And I'd like Joshua to just briefly mention, do a plug for his latest book, if you would, because I appreciate you joining us today too. I was able to be the jester, and you could ask really great questions.
No, I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, my latest book is The Banquet of Souls. We talked about the creation of self, which I published last year. Mm-hmm. So hopefully we'll talk about the Banquet of Souls later. But it was great to be on. Great to meet you. Thanks, I'm really fascinated. I have your ministry up on the other page, and I'm going to look at it further. And I want to connect with you and on LinkedIn and everything. And I want to read the book. I was looking up your new book. I don't think it's listed on Amazon yet.
Not yet. It'll be later this week.
Okay. So I want to read your Maimonides, Yahweh and Paul's Conundrum book too.
Thank you.
It's your last book, it looks like.
Excellent, and I hope that you both will keep me updated. I will do. We'll keep the word out there. So I think that's part of what we were talking about. The Christian community staying connected with informationally, entertainment, financially, every way that we can look around and connect and make draw a larger, more concerned, impactful audience to the glory of God. I think that's what God wants from us. So thank you, Amy.
Thank you. And thank you, Mike. Thank you, Joshua.
Thank you.
We are, speaking of reaching out and connecting, there's lots of churches that are connecting with Capital Ministries. I'll be speaking to the director of Capital Ministries. I think it's capmin.org. You could look it up. So pastors are inviting pastors and ministers into their houses of representatives or their places of government within their states. It's happening in Annapolis, where I live. My pastor is directly involved with that. So be listening for that on YouTube as well. We talk about political, religious, and controversial issues of the day. I mean, we have gotten into reparations, neo-Marxism, woke culture, gun control, health. The thing that I'm really focusing on for my novel, it's a work of fiction. My trilogy that they accepted is a work of fiction that's related to the soul and consciousness. I've talked to J.P. Moreland and Gary Habermas and my good friend Dr. Joshua Harris. I don't know. I'm drawing
Joshua Harris. Yes, that has happened so many times. When I years ago, when I was called up for to join my Baptist church, long time ago, they called me Joshua Harris.
And, I said Didn't I say Ferris?
No, you said Harris.
Oh,
Harris.
man.
It's a common mistake. Yeah. I mean, I get that all the time, but then people think, oh, is it the Joshua Harris? Back then they thought, oh, we got Joshua Harris at our church now. Now it's a little different, of course.
Yeah.
Well, the only reason I did that is because my good friend from Reasonable Faith, Kevin Harris, usually joins me, and that was on my brain. But my little brain, my little two-cell brain. So Dr. Joshua Ferris, and I've been reading through I've been reading through his book too. I'm trying to pull it up here, Joshua. This is the one we interviewed on not too long ago. It's the Creation of Self, A Case for the Soul. A very interesting book. So check all those out. Check out this is mostly. I'm doing all my promotional plugs, but it's the whole show today has been about Dr. Downey and her book Missions in a Minor Key. So thank you, and I ask everyone to join us on YouTube for The Real Squabble.
Thank you.
Later.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.